The rain had started just as Isabella Grant's car rolled past the city limits. It wasn't the gentle kind that pattered politely against glass. It was relentless, turning the highway into silver rivers and the windshield wipers into frantic dancers. She should have been in Manhattan, dining with investors and talking about the next billion-dollar acquisition. But instead, she'd ordered her driver to take the coastal route home, away from the noise, away from people who bowed too easily. She told herself it was because she wanted quiet. The truth was, she couldn't bear another evening surrounded by people who admired her, but didn't know her. The small coastal town appeared out of the mist like a memory she didn't realize she'd forgotten. Faded storefronts, crooked streetlights, and a diner sign that flickered between open and pen. The driver had offered to find somewhere else, but Isabella shook her head. "Here's fine," she said, grabbing her coat. The scent of rain and salt hit her as soon as she stepped outside. The diner's door jingled as she entered, and for a moment she was simply another stranger escaping the storm. Inside, it was warm, filled with the low hum of conversation and the smell of frying bacon. A radio played softly in the corner, an old love song that made her chest tighten. She took a seat by the window, her reflection faintly visible against the blurred streaks of rain. No one recognized her, and she found that strangely comforting. Here, she wasn't Isabella Grant, real estate magnate, media darling, widow of a legend. She was just a woman with cold hands and too many thoughts. The waitress approached with a practiced smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes but still managed to soften her face. "Evening," she said. "Coffee." Isabella looked up, and froze. The girl couldn't have been more than 22, maybe 23. Her hair was chestnut brown, tied back in a loose braid, with stray curls framing a face that seemed achingly familiar. Her eyes, green, bright, and alive, caught the light for just a second. And in that instant, Isabella felt something inside her shift. "Yes, coffee, please," she managed, her voice thinner than she intended. The girl nodded and moved away, her steps light and sure. Isabella's gaze followed her without meaning to. There was something about her posture, the tilt of her head, even the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, gesture so familiar that Isabella's mind began to ache with memory. She had seen those same green eyes before, in a hospital room, decades ago. In the soft gaze of an infant she had only held for hours before the world ripped them apart. Lila. The name was like a ghost, rising from the deepest part of her mind. Back then, Isabella hadn't been a billionaire. She was a young woman with ambition and a heart too soft for the cruelness of her marriage. When the divorce turned ugly, her husband had taken their daughter and disappeared. She'd fought for years, through courts, investigators, endless heartbreak. By the time the trail went cold, Isabella had buried herself in work, in building an empire so vast she hoped it would fill the silence her daughter left behind. But it never had. Now, that same little girl, no, young woman, was pouring coffee into her cup, asking if she wanted cream. Her voice was calm, polite, but distant. "Black is fine," Isabella said automatically, staring at her hands so the girl wouldn't see them tremble. The waitress smiled again, just a flicker, and moved to another table. Isabella couldn't take her eyes off her. The resemblance was too strong, too cruel. The same shape of cheekbones, the same determined chin, the same quiet, unspoken strength. It couldn't be coincidence. Isabella's heart pounded in disbelief. What were the chances? After all these years, after all the searching, could fate really have led her here, to a small diner on a forgotten road, in the middle of a rainstorm? She wanted to call out, to say her name aloud just to see how it would sound after all this time. But what if she was wrong? What if this young woman was just a stranger, and Isabella was about to make a fool of herself? And yet, deep down, she knew. There were some things a mother could never mistake. The waitress, Lila, she was sure of it now, turned back toward her, catching Isabella's gaze for a fleeting second. And in that moment, Isabella saw a flash of recognition, something uncertain flickering behind those green eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone. "Anything else, ma'am?" she asked softly, as if nothing had shifted between them. Isabella's throat felt dry. "No," she said, "thank you." As the girl walked away, Isabella sat frozen, her untouched coffee growing cold. The rain outside had softened, but the storm inside her had just begun. The rain had thinned to a drizzle by the time Isabella gathered the courage to speak again. The diner had emptied out, the air heavy with the scent of coffee and something fried long ago. Only a few truckers lingered near the counter, their laughter low and easy, while the waitress, her daughter, wiped down tables with the quiet rhythm of someone used to long shifts and small tips. Isabella watched her move, each motion graceful and precise, and realized how much she didn't know about the woman this girl had become, about the life she'd lived without her. Every second she hesitated felt like a betrayal. 22 years of silence, and she was still frozen by fear. Finally, as the girl passed by her booth again, Isabella spoke. Her voice came out softer than she intended. Lila. The girl stopped mid-step. For a heartbeat, she didn't turn around. The name hung between them, a fragile thread stretched over 2 decades. When she finally looked up, her face was calm, too calm. "I'm sorry," she said, her tone polite but wary. "Lila," Isabella repeated, her breath trembling. "It's you, isn't it?" The girl blinked, her expression guarded. "You must have me confused with someone else," she said carefully, the way someone speaks to an unstable stranger. "My name's Lily." But Isabella heard the faintest tremor in her voice, a slip so small it would have gone unnoticed by anyone else. She reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out a worn photograph, the edges soft from being handled too often. It was of a baby, pink cheeks, curious eyes, the beginnings of that same green gaze. "I've carried this for 22 years, Isabella said, sliding it across the table. "You had a birthmark, right here." She touched her own collarbone, just below the left side. "A tiny crescent. You were born with it." Lila, stiffened. Her fingers twitched as if she wanted to touch the photo but couldn't bring herself to. She swallowed hard, eyes flicking toward the exit, then back at Isabella. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice quieter now, stripped of its composure. "My name is Isabella Grant," she said. "But once I was just your mother." The girl's face paled. The air between them grew heavy, the kind of silence that carries every unspoken year. Isabella could see the storm of disbelief and pain behind those eyes, and for a moment she thought Lila might run. But she didn't. Instead, she sank into the seat across from her, her arms crossed tightly over her chest like armor. "I don't understand," Lila said. "My dad told me you didn't want me. That you left." "I never left," Isabella whispered. "He took you. I tried everything. Lawyers, detectives, anyone who could help me find you. I wrote letters, so many letters." Her voice broke, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. "He made sure you never saw them." Lila looked away, her jaw tightening. "I grew up thinking you didn't care," she said. "That you chose your money, your company, your fancy life over me." Isabella's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. "If I could trade all of it, every dollar, every house, every award, just to have one day back with you, I would." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The diner's neon sign buzzed faintly, flickering between light and shadow. Finally, Lila exhaled, the sound shaky. "You have everything," she said quietly. "I work double shifts just to make rent. I walk to work in the rain because my car broke down 3 months ago. You built empires. You don't need me." Isabella shook her head. "You're wrong. I needed you every single day." Lila's eyes shone, but her face hardened. "Then where were you when I turned 16 and wanted someone to talk to? When I got sick and couldn't afford the hospital bill? When I had to grow up alone?" Her voice rose, then cracked. "You weren't there." Isabella reached out instinctively, but Lila pulled back. "I can't undo what happened," Isabella said, her voice trembling. "But maybe I can make up for it. I can help you, Lila. You don't have to struggle anymore." Lila stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "You can't buy your way into my life," she said sharply. "I've spent years building something out of nothing. You can't just show up one day and fix it with money." The hurt in her words sliced through Isabella like glass. She wanted to protest, to explain that it wasn't about money, that it was love, guilt, desperation. But as she looked into her daughter's eyes, she saw something unshakable: pride, strength, and the same fire Isabella once carried when she had to fight the world alone. "I'm not trying to buy you," Isabella whispered. "I just want to know you." Lila hesitated, the war inside her visible in every breath. Then, with a quiet shake of her head, she said, "You had your world, Isabella. And I had to survive in mine." And just like that, she walked away, apron untied, head high, leaving Isabella sitting in the booth, staring at the photograph between her trembling fingers. The rain outside had stopped completely, but inside, Isabella felt every drop that had ever fallen. For days after that night, Isabella couldn't shake the image of Lila walking away, the sway of her braid, the echo of her words, the sound of rain dripping from the diner's awning. She returned to her penthouse in the city, surrounded by glass and silence, but it all felt wrong. Every polished surface reflected the same truth. All her success, her empire, her fortune, they meant nothing against the hollow ache left by her daughter's refusal. Her assistant had noticed the change, of course. Meetings were postponed. Calls went unanswered. The usual steel in Isabella's tone had softened into something fragile, distant. She spent hours staring out over the skyline, wondering where her daughter slept that night, whether she'd eaten, whether she regretted anything at all, though Isabella knew she shouldn't hope for that. Regret was a luxury her daughter had no reason to afford her. The photograph she'd shown Lila sat on her desk now, the edges frayed, a coffee stain marring one corner. Isabella traced the curve of the baby's cheek with her thumb and remembered the soft cooing sounds, the faint scent of talcum powder. She remembered promising to protect her, and failing. A week passed before anything changed. Early one morning, as she was leaving for a meeting she didn't want to attend, her housekeeper handed her a small envelope. "This came for you, Ms. Grant," she said. "No return address." Isabella frowned. She wasn't expecting mail. Not the kind that arrived quietly, without assistance or stamps of importance. The envelope was plain, cream-colored, and her name was written in simple blue ink, the handwriting uneven but careful. Her heart began to race before she even opened it. She carried it to her office, shut the door, and sat at her desk. For a moment, she simply stared at it, afraid that whatever it contained might break her all over again. Then she took a deep breath and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was the same, small, neat, uncertain at the edges. "Maybe one day," it read. "But for now, I'm not ready to be your daughter. I'm still learning who I am." No signature, no return address, but Isabella didn't need one. She knew that handwriting now, just as surely as she knew the tilt of that chin, the spark in those eyes. She read the note over and over, each time feeling something different. The first time, pain, sharp and immediate, like being cut open again. The second time, resignation. The third, something softer. A strange kind of peace. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't hatred, either. It was space, a fragile, necessary distance. And for the first time, Isabella realized that maybe that was the most loving thing Lila could have given her right now, honesty. She set the note beside the photograph on her desk, aligning the edges carefully, as if the two fragments together made something whole. For the first time in years, she cried without trying to stop herself, not the polite tears of a public figure, but deep, shaking sobs that came from a place she'd locked away long ago. When the tears finally slowed, the city outside had begun to glow with the soft gold of evening. She stood by the window, her reflection shimmering faintly in the glass. Below, life went on, people walking, cars honking, laughter drifting from somewhere she couldn't see. It struck her how small she was in all of it, a woman who had conquered boardrooms, but lost the one person who could have made it all mean something. Yet somewhere out there, her daughter was alive, working, breathing, choosing herself, and that mattered more than anything Isabella could ever buy. That night, she went to her study and pulled out one of her old journals, the kind she hadn't opened since before the money, before the power. The pages smelled faintly of ink and dust. She wrote slowly, her pen scratching across the paper. "My dearest Lila, I'll wait. However long you need, I'll wait, not as the woman who lost you, but as the mother who's finally learning how to find you the right way." She tore out the page and folded it neatly, tucking it inside a new envelope addressed only with a single word, Lila. She didn't know where to send it. Maybe she never would, but she placed it in her drawer, a promise to herself that when the time came, when her daughter was ready, she'd have the right words waiting. Days turned into weeks. Isabella went back to work, but she was different now. She smiled more gently. She listened. When her employees spoke of family, she no longer brushed it aside. She stopped measuring worth in numbers and began quietly funding scholarships for young women from small towns, women who reminded her of Lila's strength. Sometimes, late at night, she'd picture the diner, the hum of conversation, the smell of rain, the flicker of the neon open sign. She'd imagine her daughter there, laughing with someone, her apron tied loosely, her face at peace. The thought no longer hurt quite the same way. Love, Isabella realized, wasn't about reclaiming what you'd lost. It was about waiting, patiently, quietly, for the door to open again someday. And when it did, she would be there, not as the billionaire trying to make amends, but as a mother ready to listen.